back to your coffee break with Fueled Networks. Today, we're going to dive deeper into data protection and how Microsoft has made it easy and efficient for the end user to use. So let's remember this is about protecting information wherever it goes. And so the question is, do you have a strategy for protecting and managing sensitive information? Do you know where your sensitive data resides? This seems like a very simple question, but trust me, it is a complex issue for most organizations of any size. Trying to understand where is all of our sensitive information can be a huge project of its own. The second question is, do you have control of your data as it travels both inside and outside of your organization? When it gets shared through email or SharePoint sites or other online services? When it goes out on someone's mobile device? And lastly, are you using multiple solutions to classify, label, and protect sensitive data? We find that many of our customers are, and that it's a disjointed set of solutions that don't work together for a common goal. Let's take a look at what Microsoft does. Now let's take a quick look at the life cycle of a sensitive file. After data is created, you typically want to have a system in place to scan and discover sensitive data as it moves across devices, apps, and services. In most environments, only a small percentage of the entire mass of data contains sensitive information. The key is to be able to identify and detect the data that contains the sensitive information or important information you care about. Once sensitive data is discovered and identified, you want to be able to classify and label that data in a manner that reflects its sensitivity, even if the data is considered sensitive. They are typically different levels of sensitivity, and you may want different actions to be applied based on the level of sensitivity. For example, if a document contains employee ID numbers, it may be labeled as confidential, whereas if it contains social security numbers, it may be labeled as highly confidential. Now, once the data has been stamped with a sensitivity label, your company should be able to apply the appropriate protection policy automatically applied. This may include one of several protection actions, such as encryption, restricting access rights, applying visual markings, or a watermark, applying a retention or deletion policy, or even a data loss prevention action, such as blocking or sharing. Whether the data stays in one place or moves around, it is critical that IT has the ability to monitor data access and sharing usage and respond quickly to potential abuse or threats. This can be in the form of real-time alerts, emails, or reporting dashboard. Finally, depending on the sensitivity of the data and corporate defined policy, as the data ages, it is subject to expiration, retention, and deletion. This is an important aspect of overall information protection because if sensitive data persists in the environment longer than necessary, it can pose a potential risk if discovered and compromised. As you can see, there are key considerations to evaluate at each step of the life cycle. Now let's start to talk about Microsoft's unique approach and how we can help you protect sensitive data throughout the life cycle, both within and outside of the organization. In order to achieve complete protection across your organization, it's important that you are able to discover sensitive information no matter where it is created or lives. That means having sensitive data discovery capabilities across your on-premises file shares or data centers, on individual devices, as well as across cloud services and software applications. So, we know that with the shift to the mobile-first, cloud-first world, the perimeter is only a single component of protecting information. It's important that we balance the goals of security and productivity. One, you want to be able to enable and encourage collaboration to create new business value, and this requires data sharing and data mobility. At the same time, you want to prevent unauthorized disclosure, modification, and destruction of data and important information. Lastly, you want to reduce and manage the risk of user errors, such as unintentional sharing or an inappropriate usage of information. Ultimately, data must be protected at all times, both inside and outside of the network. Let's look at the discover and classify phases of information protection. This involves scanning and detecting sensitive data, all based on the policy defined and configured by your organization. Now, a couple key considerations. You'll want to ask yourself, is there an automated way to discover important data? Which regulations and compliance factors matter? Is my data spread out across devices, cloud, and on-prem? Is my data spread out geographically? Are certain employees or groups more relevant for discovery? And do I know the characteristics of sensitive or important data? Classification and labeling sensitive data can come in different forms, again based on the policies and specific requirements of each individual. It typically starts with business functions such as legal, compliance, HR, and finance teams collectively defining the sensitive information policies for the organization. For example, each organization must decide as to what constitutes highly confidential versus general business information. Microsoft provides a default recommended set of classification and sensitivity labels that can be applied to documents, and it can also customize the classification and labeling structure based on your needs. There is also flexibility in defining how sensitivity labels are applied to documents. Policy can be set to automatically apply a sensitivity label to a document based on the detection of sensitive information. For example, policy could be defined to automatically mark a document as confidential if it contains social security numbers. Alternatively, a recommended classification and sensitivity label can be provided to users. Companies can also determine if they want to give their users additional flexibility or empowerment, such as the ability to override an automatic classification, along with requiring a justification for the override. And because sometimes the company and IT doesn't have a complete understanding of all the different types of data that their employees may be working with, you can also enable users to classify and apply a sensitivity label themselves. For example, if they're working on a document that contains privileged information, they can apply a sensitivity label of highly confidential right within the app. Now, we've talked about classifying and labeling sensitive files and crafting information protection policies. Let's take a look at an example of what this looks like in practice. In this example, the worker is using Excel, and a policy has been configured to detect credit card information. Policy has also been configured to automatically label the document as confidential based on the presence of the credit card information, as you can see here. It's easy for the end user to see and understand the classification and labeling applied to the document. So why is classification and applying sensitivity labels so important in the overall information protection process? This is what enables actions to be taken on the sensitivity information. The company defines its policies and actions based on the classification and labeling of data, such as the protection actions to apply to the data, or how to manage the data in terms of retention, expiration, and deletion. Because classification and labeling is the means by which you apply and enforce policy actions, it's critical that organizations are thoughtful and deliberate in their approach to crafting their information protection policies. Once you are able to discover and then classify your data, you move to perhaps the most important phase of information protection, applying policy-based actions to sensitive information. Let's take a closer look at what it means to protect sensitive information. Now, a couple key considerations. What protection actions can be taken on a document? Can protection automatically be applied based on policy? Can users manually protect when necessary? Can I create policy scope to a particular group? Can different protection be applied to internal versus external? Does protection apply across devices, apps, and service? Are users made aware of what they can and should do? And do protection options help me meet regulatory requests? Here's an example of protection action being taken on sensitive information that is detected in a document. In this example, DLP capabilities in Office 365 has detected social security numbers, which triggers a policy that the organization has configured. A policy tip is presented to the end user, warning them that the document contains sensitive information and sharing of the file is restricted. While you need to be able to protect sensitive data on Windows 10 devices, as well as other device platforms, sensitive data rarely lives solely on the device and will often travel or be stored in some other location, such as on-premises file shared or in a cloud service. There are several complementary protection measures you can take to protect this sensitive information as it travels outside of the device. As a starting point, Both Azure and Office 365 have data encryption built into the service for both data at rest and data in transit. To protect individual files, you can apply rights-based permissions so that only intended recipients can access and view the information. You can apply data loss prevention actions, such as blocking the sharing of a file that is detected to have sensitive information, such as credit card information or social security numbers. You can limit or block access to cloud apps present in your environment, or revoke app access among specific individuals. To help end users make more informed decisions, you can enable policy tips that notify users that the document they are working with contains sensitive information, or you can even automatically apply a visual marking to a document, such as header or footer. To help prevent sensitive information from staying around longer than necessary and potentially posing a risk, you can automatically retain, expire, or delete documents based on data governance policies defined by your company.